Okay, so we are in week 2 of our new series that we're doing called Through the Storm. And each week we're going to be looking at different ways that we can make sure that our faith lasts and gets us through the storm and get us through the other side, and hopefully for the better, and not just holding on barely, but maybe allowing God to do something awesome and amazing. And so for that, our theme verse is Luke 6:47-49. And this is where Jesus is giving an example of two people's lives. And one person builds their home directly on the ground, and the next person decides to do a little bit of extra work, and they build their house on the rock. And both of them have storms, and the person that built their house on the ground, well, the storm washes away their home and their life. And then the person that built their home on the rock, well, the storm hits them, but they persevere. And so within my family, we have done, my grandparents were both in construction, both my granddads, and my dad was in construction. And so I've been in construction, around construction for all of my life. And construction work is hard work, but I absolutely love it in some ways because you can put in hours and see the work that you've done. And you can put in a lot of time, and then there's something there that shows the work that you've done. And so I've gotten to where I love to do daily projects around the house and things because I've put in hours, and then I can see what I've done and enjoy what my hard work has gotten me. And the hard thing with construction, though, is that there's times where construction speeds up and it's very quick. You can build the exterior of a house or a building pretty quickly, and then it slows down as wiring and plumbing and drywall and all of that stuff. The more meticulous things, well, they take time. And so there's this ebb and flow of construction where it seems like it speeds up and it slows down and speeds up. And I think there's times in our life where we often are trying to build our life, build our home, and what Jesus is talking about, and we just want it to speed so much quicker than what it really takes. And that if I can go and spend an hour at church, then I want to be able to walk away after that hour a mature believer. Or if I can come in and I can spend an hour on Wednesday nights, or if I go to Sunday school, we want to be able to see the benefit and what we built with that hour of time. And there's times where we are kind of like where we're building our home and we want it just to be there. We want to be able just to hit the skip button and go through all this process, skip the whole process, and we just come out on the other side with a brand new home. And our spiritual lives are more mature and we're following Jesus all the much closer. But when we're following Jesus, that's not how it works. When we follow Jesus, it takes time. It is Sundays of in and out of your weekly flow. It is going to Wednesday nights. It's spending time with Jesus day in and day out. And then over time, as you follow that process, as you follow the steps in some ways, it is then that you come out the other side as a mature believer. But many times I know I'm impatient. And I just want to be able to go to church and feel like I'm fine and not have to do all this extra work. Or I don't want to have to wait for me to be a mature believer. And so I bring that up because as storms hit us, they hit us and it's so unexpected, and it hits us in such an overwhelming way that it can be all we can do just to hold on to our faith. And there's many times where we want our faith to be stronger, and that when the storm hits us, it's like it's not even there. And instead of this big hurricane that's coming in, it's just a light breeze because of how mature we are. And that's rarely how life works. Many times when that storm hits us, no matter what it is, no matter how mature we are, we can feel every part of it. We can feel the grief and the loss. We can feel the fear of what might happen. And so Jesus is inviting us into, as we go through storms, to take it day by day. For it to be a process, for it to be a step by step. And then after a while, as we get through the storm, he's going to work something within us in that storm. And that's a really hard thing to come by. Because a lot of times we feel like when we're in the storms of life, it is all I can do just to get the day to end. But if we can trust God with what the storm's doing out there, then I can be present with what he's doing here. And there's times where in the middle of the storm, God's trying to build something in your life. There's times where God's trying to do something and accomplish something that's much more than you ever imagined. But you have to have the faith to trust God with the bigger picture. Now, I can remember in 2011, my dad's business failed and we lost everything. And I was in college at that time. It was my first year in college, and I came back for Christmas break, and so we had lost our home, we had lost our vehicles, and there was a lot of questions on what we were going to do next. And so all of our Christmas plans changed as we lost and watched everything get taken from us. And so we're sitting there celebrating Christmas at my grandma's because we don't have a home and we don't have the space to live. And even though I had all these questions, and even though I was upset and frustrated because I planned on doing something much different that Christmas season, there was a blessing that was in the middle of it. And that if I could trust God with what He was going to do, and even though He changed my plans and everything got flipped upside down, I got to spend a lot of great time with my grandma. And time that I hadn't planned on. And I can remember looking back at that Christmas of spending nights with her and watching some of her favorite shows, or just sitting there getting to talk to her. And I can remember us as a family getting to spend time together in a way that we weren't normally able to do because we were broke and had lost everything. And so in the middle of this storm where there's so many questions about what's coming next, and our minds are so tempted to jump to what if this happens, and what if this happens, and what if this happens, and what if this doesn't happen, if we can trust God with just this moment and this day, with where my feet are and where I am present, there's a lot of times where blessings can be had. And that maybe He's trying to show you something and show you that He's walking with you, but we have to be present with where we are. And the great temptation that when we face storms is for us to be anywhere but where we are. Because it's too painful, it's too scary, and so our mind runs into all these other areas because we're trying to figure out what's going to happen. And one of the most weirdest and mixed blessings of storms is that it makes us helpless. It helps us to see how little control of our life that we have. And that we like to think that if I've got insurance and if I've got finances and if I eat right and do healthy things, then I'm not going to be diseased, or I'm not going to face disease, I'm not going to have all these other stuff happen, and my insurance is going to cover me. And so when these storms hit and they just overwhelm all of the fences that we have built, all the protections that we thought we had, there's a blessing that can be had there because we see our absolute need for Jesus. And there's so many times within the United States as we live in a blessed country where we don't have need for many things, where we overestimate how much control we have over our life. And we think that we're a little too powerful and we have a little too much say in what happens with us. But the storms always remind us of what little power we do have. And if you can give in to that and to trust the Lord and say, all right, I know that I can't control this and this and this, but I can control where I am now in this moment and how I respond and with what I'm doing with my life, then the Lord can show up and do some amazing things. The question is, how do we get there? And I believe the way that we do that is to take it step by step and day by day. Not to focus in on tomorrow, because tomorrow's got its own problems and its own worries. When Thomas Edison was improving upon the light bulbs that we use pretty much the same thing that we do today, he had over 3,000 theories on how to make his light bulbs better. And he failed over 1,000 times on getting his light bulb to work and to be cost efficient. And so he's quoted as saying this. He says, I have not failed 1,000 times, but found 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And here's what I'm trying to point out is that there's many times where we want to skip the thousands of tries that we have to do just to get to the end result. And in storms of life, we want to skip the storm so that I can come out on the other side. More mature, not having to deal with these things, not being filled with anxiousness and pain and worry. And the point is that if Edison skipped any of those tries, he wouldn't have ended up with the light bulb that we use today. He needed those thousands of failures so that he could know exactly what type of light bulb to create. And the storms of life that we face, we need each and every day. We need to take it step by step. And in some ways, the Lord's going to use that storm to bring about blessings that we are not expecting and we are not focused in on at that time. Look at what Jesus says in Matthew 6:34. Matthew 6:34, he says, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And so as Jesus is looking out, and he's talking to people that are poor, that do not have a lot of means for them to have clothing. Most of the people in that day had one set of clothing. When we have closets full of clothing, they have one shirt and one cloak that they would normally be able to afford. And so Jesus is looking out to these people that don't have much, and if any little small storm were to hit them, it could completely destroy their life. Jesus is looking out, and he's calling them to focus in on his kingdom, and Jesus will provide. God will provide everything that they need. And as he's making this and he's talking to them, this is what he ends on. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Jesus is calling his followers and each of us that we have to focus in on this moment and on this day. Not to skip forward into what tomorrow holds. Not for us to think about next week. Not for us to be worried about what's going to happen next month and all of the what ifs and to be filled with anxiousness and worry. But for us to focus in on this moment and what the Lord has for us today. Because if we get so worried, if we get so focused in on tomorrow or the next week or the next month, then I miss out on what the Lord's trying to do in this moment. And so I want to draw us, and we're going to go into Deuteronomy 16, 4 to 5. So we're going to spend our time. Deuteronomy 16, 4 to 5. The context for this and what's happening in the story is Israel has just come out of the nation of Egypt. They've been called out, and they've either got probably a couple 100,000 people with them. And so as they come out of the nation of Egypt, they brought food and supplies for them to be able to get to the promised land. But as they're going on their journey and as they've had to take pit stops at different places and kind of stop and rest and then keep pushing forward, well, all their supplies have run out. Which means that they don't have food for them to continue their journey. There's no way that they're going to get to where they're going and be able to be healthy and to live long enough for them to get to the promised land. And so the nation of Israel and the people respond by grumbling and getting upset, and they say, well, God, you brought us all the way out here for you to kill us because you're not providing for us. There's no faith there. And so the Lord responds, and he creates manna for them. And so I want to read that. Deuteronomy 16, 4 to 5. It says, Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So the Lord's going to say, I'm going to rain down manna from heaven for you each and every day. And for 5 days, you're not allowed to gather what you need for the following day. You are only allowed to get the food, the manna that you need for that day. And so if you were to gather it, and there's a story in here right after this where the people do not trust the Lord, and they gather more than enough food than what they need for that day, and they try to take it for tomorrow, well, that food gets rotten, and they can't eat it. And so the question we have to ask is, why is he doing that? God could have done anything. Lord could have set up and said, here's a wagon of food for you. You come here once a week. But he doesn't. And so he's trying to teach them something. And that as they are facing storms, as they're going through difficulty, and as they just go through life in general, there's a part of us where we need to align ourselves with what Jesus is doing each and every day. And that if I'm going to get through storms, if I'm going to face difficulty, if I'm going to get through this life, there's a part where I have to align myself with the Lord each and every day. And that you are not allowed, I am not allowed for myself to be able to go out and gather and rely on what happened yesterday for it to get me through today. And there's a lot of times where we do that. Where we have these spiritually high moments. There's this mountaintop experience where we've come really close with the Lord. And that's great. It's awesome for us to celebrate. But then we allow that to carry us for days and weeks and months and years after that experience. And so now instead of us being filled and following Jesus, we're running on fumes. Because we allowed the mountaintop experience that was meant to get us through this one particular season, this one particular day, to be the thing that's now getting us through tomorrow. And so what the call that God is trying to show them is that if you want to get through this life, and if you want to get through storms and the difficulty, because in the wilderness it is continual difficulty for them, There's a part where you have to go through it day by day by day. That I've got to focus with where my feet are right now, and I'm going to go to the Lord and align myself with day by day. Which means when I spend time with the Lord and I'm worshiping Him, I'm reading Scripture, I'm in community where I'm talking to other believers that are encouraging me, that I've got to do that daily. There's no point in where you can come to church on Sunday and that's supposed to get you through the week. That's not how that works. As believers, it is we come day by day because I don't know what grace and mercies and love and whatever I need, truth, I might need something new and different every single day. There's parts of me where on Monday I might be doing well, and so there's a moment of high praise where I'm worshiping the Lord, and then Tuesday where I'm struggling, which means I need more grace and more mercy that day. And the same is true for you. You cannot allow what happened yesterday to be the thing that gets you through today. That's what the point of manna from heaven is. You have to trust and come to the Lord each and every day, expectant that He's going to fill you with exactly what you need. Some days it's going to be more, other days it's going to be less. Other days it's going to be filled with grace and mercy because you feel like you've absolutely failed and messed up. And other days, the Lord's going to hit you with a lot of truth because maybe you're a little too filled with pride. Each and every day is going to be different. And that's why you've got to be spending time with the Lord each and every day. Manna from heaven comes daily. It is meant for me to take it day by day, step by step, and I'm spending time with the Lord that moment and that day and that time because that's what I need for that moment. And so as we go through storms in life, the temptation is constantly, and even if we're not going through the storm, is not to be where I am. My temptation is to think about my future and what's happening there, or to think about and concern myself with anything outside of this present moment. And Jesus is constantly calling us back to be where our feet are, to be present in this moment, to be spending time with Him in this moment, and to allow Him to fill us up in this moment. But we all too easily allow a spiritual high and a great moment that happened a month ago to be the thing that's still driving us today. And then we get frustrated and we get upset when the Lord we don't feel as close to the Lord. When in all reality, we're not going to Him like we need to. And so as you face storms, and even as you just go through life, the constant call of the believer is not that we just get to hit the skip button and then one day I wake up and my spiritual house has been built on the rock. The point of what Jesus is saying is that you're constantly building your house day in and day out. And that house building does not end until you die. You're making little tweaks here, you're making little tweaks there. Sometimes you're doing big additions. Sometimes you're tearing down walls. Each and every day is a time where you're focused in on what the Lord is doing for that moment and what you need in that day. But a lot of times we settle for less. I know I settle for less. Where I think that I'm too busy, I don't have enough time, and so I settle for something far less than what the Lord has for me. And then when the right storm comes and hits me in a dry spiritual season of my life, I get mad at the Lord. And really I should be upset at myself. Because I'm blaming Him for something that I did. The call is constantly manna from heaven, day by day. I'm taking it day by day. I'm walking with the Lord day by day. Not week by week. Not 3 months ago I had some spiritual enlightenment and now I'm here today. It is day by day by day. And so I'm going to draw your attention to Lamentations 3:20-24. And the book of Lamentations is written by Jeremiah, and Lamentations is after Babylon comes in and destroys and wipes out the nation of Israel. And so Jeremiah, as a prophet of God, is left there, and he is witnessing the utter destruction and defeat that Israel. He's left in rubble. And so Lamentations is written as a response to that. And so here we go in Lamentations 3:20-24. I will remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Jeremiah is upset, and he's completely defeated. 21, yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, and therefore I will wait for him. Jeremiah is going through a storm where he just witnessed probably friends and family die during the war. And now he's seeing this once great nation completely wiped out and utterly destroyed. And he's missing over half of the nation as they've been taken out by Babylon. And so as he's saying, my soul is downcast within me, he's not being cute, he's not being poetic. He's saying that I'm in a state of utter defeat. And then he goes on and he talks about that he's going to have hope because the Lord's compassion is new every single morning. And the beautiful part of that is if we kind of marry those two ideas of manna from heaven, where I'm spending day by day, and the Lord's mercies for you are new every single day. There's no moment where you're going to run out of his mercies. There's no point where you're going to run out and overuse and overabuse God's mercy and his love for you. That if you go to him every single day, he's not just going to fill you up, he's going to overabundantly, your cup's going to overflow with his grace and his mercy. And when we come to him day by day, even if our soul is downcast, there's still a part of us that has hope as we look to the Lord. And the beautiful part about this is, look at verse 24. He says, I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. And so as Jeremiah is sitting out and he's seeing this utter defeat, he doesn't know what to do next. I am sure there's parts of Jeremiah that wishes he could maybe gather some people together and start rebuilding. Or maybe we need to gather everybody together and we're going to have this great church service where we're going to respond and we're going to try to get God to do something in response to what's happening. And Jeremiah doesn't. Jeremiah is spending time with the Lord day by day as his mercies and compassion are new every single day. And then he says in response, I will wait for him. And as we go through storms in life, as our soul is downcast, how big is the temptation for us to try to make things happen? Where we try to fix our own problems, where we try to maybe pray a little bit more, or we listen to a little bit extra worship songs, or maybe we read our Bible a little bit more, not because we want to spend time with God, but because we want to try to get him to do what we want. Or we're trying to get God to move. And so the beauty of the relationship with the Lord is lost because we're just trying to use him. And Jeremiah's response is saying, I trust in the Lord enough that I'm going to wait for him. I will move when he wants me to move, and I will do what he wants me to do. But at this point, I'm going to sit and wait for him to move. And as we go through storms, that's one of the hardest things for us to do, is to wait. And now it comes back and circles back to the question is, are you going to have enough faith and trust in the Lord for you to be present and for you to wait in this moment? Not to think about what lies tomorrow or next week or next month, for you to be here where the Lord wants you to be. Not to struggle. A couple of years ago, it hit me that as I was going through a storm, it's crazy to me that I can trust the Lord for my salvation, but I can't trust him for the storm that I'm going through. And I think all of us here would admit the greater miracle is our salvation. But when the storm hits, that trust sometimes goes out the window, doesn't it? When we first went into ministry, we were at a church in Kentucky. Ezra had just been born. And so we had just gone through this big and massive life change. And before that time, I could spend time with the Lord easily. Like day by day, it was not a big deal. But then as we had Ezra, everything changed. My schedule, everything changed as we now bent our whole lives to this newborn. And so the time that I found it easy for me to spend time with the Lord had completely gone out the window. And so I stopped spending time with the Lord as much as I used to. And instead of being a daily habit that I had, it kind of transitioned to every other day or maybe every 3 days. And so as this was happening, my spiritual walk with the Lord was kind of declining a little bit as we made this adjustment for him. There was a storm that was brewing and it started to hit us. And as we started to face stuff within the church and difficulties within that season of life, it was a double whammy because spiritually I'm in a desert because I'm not spending time with the Lord like I should. But then externally, with everything else that's happening, there's this storm that's hitting. And so that season was one of the most difficult seasons, not because of necessarily what we were going through, but spiritually because I was so dry and so far away from the Lord. And I can remember we took the college students to this conference, and so we're sitting there in this time of worship, and the Lord just hit me with the truth that I needed where I had just drifted from it. And I was allowing my spiritualness from college and the high mountaintop experiences that I had in my past to be the thing that was carrying me up until this point. And instead of going to Him day by day by day, I was allowing stuff that happened months ago to be the thing that made me feel close to the Lord. So I was running on fumes. And so that was a really hard truth. And we're sitting there worshiping, and I just start crying. And within that, as the Lord allowed me to see that, and then there's this overwhelming sense of peace and love that sweeps in at the same time. I just go back to that moment so often as I think about taking things day by day. Because as Ezra was born, it wasn't an intentional thing for me. It wasn't like, you know what I want to do today? Not spend time with the Lord. I think I'm going to do that. It was, well, he didn't sleep good that night, and so I was very tired. Or we had something at church that I had to be there. There's any number of things that were happening. And I allowed the excuses to start to define my relationship with the Lord. And then that storm hit. And it wasn't even a big storm, but it knocked me on my butt. Because spiritually, I was not where I should be. So my encouragement for you is for you to spend time with the Lord day by day. If it's 5 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, it's an hour. That you are spending time with Him, reading His Word, talking to godly friends, spending time in worship, listening to worship music, praying. Find your way to spend time with Him so that your heart can align with Him, and that way you will have the mercy and the compassion that you need for that day. And that over time, you'll eventually build this amazing, gigantic spiritual house that can weather the storms. But it's not going to all happen at one time. And so we've got to have the faith in God that what I'm doing now, even though it seems insignificant of me reading a chapter a day or a couple verses a day, that eventually those things will add up. And they will make a difference as I face the storm. Or if I'm in the middle of the storm now, I have the faith that even though in this moment I'm reading a couple verses, or I'm reading a chapter, or I'm listening to worship music, or I'm praying and I'm not feeling much, that I'm going to trust that the Lord will start to build up and get bigger and bigger, and it will turn into something. And so my question for you is, are you allowing spiritual moments that happened weeks, months ago to be the thing that is defining your relationship with the Lord today? Are you allowing your past to determine what's happening in this moment? And secondly is, do you have the faith to trust God for you to focus in on today? To allow Him to work and to do amazing things. Because the beautiful part about following Him is that even though you're going through a storm, and even though He's walking with you, He's still working within you and bringing you closer to Him. He's got a bigger picture for your life than you do. And He's not going to give up on you. So I'm going to pray. And we'll have our time of response. And so if you feel like maybe you're going through a storm now, or maybe things are not that bad, but you're allowing what's happened in the past with the Lord to define your relationship with Him today instead of pursuing Him daily, you just need to come and pray. I would encourage you to do so. And you don't have to come and talk to me. You can come to the altar if you want. Or you can sit there in your seat and just think about it, reflect on it. Let me pray for you, and then we'll have a time of reflection. And if you want to join the church or talk about salvation, of course, this is a great time to do that. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much for this time together. God, thank you that we get to open up your word and reflect on you, and that you want a relationship with us. And God, I pray for everyone here, including myself, that we spend time with you day in and day out. so that we can align ourselves and we can know where to find your grace and mercy, that we can know that you're with us and walking with us each and every moment, whether we're going through a storm or not. And Lord, help us to have the faith to be where our feet are and not worried about what's coming tomorrow. Lord, we love you and we ask these things in your name.